Imagine what it would be like if your confidence at work was limitless. It would mean that you could be in a meeting with senior leaders and participate in the conversation without second-guessing yourself. It would mean that you could lead a big, intimidating meeting with assertiveness and polish. And it would mean that you would walk out of intimidating rooms feeling like you nailed it instead of feeling frustrated. This level of confidence is possible for you when you have the right confidence-building approach. Today, I'm going to teach you the one subtle pitfall that prevents people from building that deeper sense of confidence, and I'm going to explain exactly how to build that bigger, unshakable confidence that you've been craving so that you can take up space no matter what room you're in. If you're new, by the way, hello, I'm Jessica. I'm a New York Times featured podcast host, a prior McKinsey consultant, and a current leadership and executive coach for professional women. I am here to help you build deep, unshakable confidence so that you can find your voice as a leader. And I want to start by teaching you about a subtle obstacle that gets in the way of having that deeper, more unshakable confidence that you desire. The thing that gets in the way is something that I call conditional confidence. And many people don't even realize that they're building conditional confidence, but it's important to be aware of it because it can really limit how confident you are able to feel at work. Conditional confidence is when you feel confident, but only when certain conditions are met. So I'm going to teach you the 3 biggest patterns that are all signs of conditional confidence. So as I'm teaching them, you can reflect on whether these sound familiar, and if they do, it means that you've been building conditional confidence. So the first pattern is that you tend to feel confident when you have knowledge or expertise, but you don't feel confident when you're lacking knowledge and expertise. So people with conditional confidence will participate and speak up in meetings if they have subject matter expertise or if they're familiar with the topic or if they feel prepared. But as soon as they find themselves in a room where they're not familiar with the topic, or maybe the conversation pivots to an area that they don't feel like an expert in, their confidence starts to fade and they become more quiet and withdrawn, and they decide to defer to the other people in the room and keep quiet. The second pattern that is an indicator that you've been building conditional confidence is that you feel confident when you have status. So status means that your title in the room is higher than other people's title. So if you're in a room with your direct reports or people in the organization who are less experienced than you feel confident, you speak up, maybe you take more of a leadership role in the room. But then on the flip side, if you're in a room where you don't have status, maybe there are a lot of senior leaders in the room, maybe your boss is in the room. In those situations, you don't feel confident and you struggle to have a voice in those conversations, and you're not as outspoken when it comes to sharing your ideas. The third pattern that is a clue that you've been building conditional confidence is if you feel confident when you're emotionally ready, but you don't feel confident when you're emotionally not ready. So what I mean by emotionally ready is situations where you feel like you can handle the room, situations where you've had time to prepare and you can kind of predict how the situation is going to unfold. In those situations, you go in with a feeling of readiness, and that readiness helps you feel confident. But as soon as you don't have that readiness, your confidence goes away. So maybe the room is unpredictable. Maybe you feel outside your comfort zone or outside your element. Maybe you get asked a hard question, and all of a sudden you have that feeling of like, I'm not ready. I feel nervous. I don't feel like I can handle this room. And in those situations, your confidence disappears. So all 3 of these patterns are signs of conditional confidence. And I call it conditional confidence because your confidence is conditional on these things being present. It's conditional on you having knowledge and expertise. It's conditional on you having status in the room. It's conditional on you feeling emotionally ready. This is why it's called conditional confidence. Now, there's nothing wrong with conditional confidence. It is true that all of these things help you feel confident. So there's nothing bad that you're doing. It's just that conditional confidence has a ceiling. And I'm going to explain why. So it's a little bit counterintuitive because with conditional confidence, you start to realize like, oh, when I'm prepared, I feel confident. When I'm emotionally ready, I feel confident. And so you see those variables as enablers of your confidence, right? You want more of the things that help you feel confident. You want more knowledge. You want more status in the room. You want more emotional readiness. And your confidence building process turns into a pursuit of those variables because those are the variables that help you feel confident. The thing that most people don't realize, though, is once you get into middle management and you start to move past middle management in your career and into bigger levels of leadership, those variables that used to enable your confidence are now starting to limit your confidence because you can only feel confident when those conditions are present. So I want you to think about it as being like a dog who is on a leash that is tied to a pole. The dog is tethered to the pole. It can't walk past a certain distance. Similarly, with conditional confidence, you are tethered to these variables. And if you don't have these conditions present, you can't feel confident. Now, why does this become a challenge as you get into higher levels of leadership? Well, it's because as a leader, your company is now asking more of you. In the past, they asked you to be an expert. They asked you to be able to lead when you're with your team or with more junior people. But now that you're stepping up and taking on bigger things, you're being asked to lead when you're not an expert. You're being asked to lead when you're not the most senior person in the room. The demands of a leader are inherently bigger than the demands that are placed on you earlier in your career. And the thing that companies need out of their leaders are leaders who can feel confident and show up in the room confident even when they are lacking expertise or lacking status, right? The organization doesn't want leaders who are tethered to a pole and tethered to these conditions in order to feel confident. The organization wants leaders who are untethered, who can feel confident under all circumstances. And that leads me to one of the biggest teachings in today's episode, which is what I call unconditional confidence. Unconditional confidence is the ability to feel confident regardless of the conditions around you. So it means that you can feel confident when you don't have knowledge or subject matter expertise. So you can be in a meeting where the topic is completely new and you're still speaking up and asking questions and helping everyone problem solve. It also means you can feel confident when you don't have status. You could be the most junior person in the room, surrounded by senior leaders, and your participation and the confidence with which you participate will look the same way it looks when you're in a room with your team or with your direct reports. And finally, people with unconditional confidence know how to find and project confidence even when they don't feel emotionally ready. So maybe they get caught off guard, maybe they're thrown into a situation that is outside their comfort zone, and all of a sudden they feel like they're not ready. In those moments, people with unconditional confidence know how to pull it out and find the confidence to speak up powerfully and take up space in those situations. So as you can probably tell from my excitement, unconditional confidence is so much more powerful and exciting than conditional confidence because it helps you show up big even when the conditions around you get a little bit hard and a little bit rocky. Now, I want to spend the rest of this episode talking about how you build unconditional confidence, This is the single biggest thing that I work on with my clients. And I have a process and a philosophy to help women build unconditional confidence so that they can take up space and bring a big, bold, powerful voice into the room, even when they're the most junior person in the room, even when they're not an expert, and even when things don't go as planned. Now, before I get into the how of how I guide my clients through this, the first thing that I want to share is in order to build unconditional confidence, you have to be willing to break up with the addiction to conditional confidence. Conditional confidence is very addictive because it's a very safe way of building confidence. You're gathering expertise, you're making sure you're the most senior person in the room. These are all things that feel safe and they're not risky. And so your confidence comes from you feeling safe and feeling like you have it all together. With unconditional confidence, you're turning that model on its head, right? You're building confidence by practicing not being ready, practicing being in non-ideal conditions. So it's inherently harder to build in some ways than conditional confidence, but it's also way more powerful and way more rewarding. So I personally think that it's worth it. But the first thing that will set you up for success is to go into it knowing that it's going to feel different than what you've been doing. But it's a good thing that it feels different than what you've been doing, because if what you've been doing isn't working and isn't getting you the outcome that you want, then you do need to change things up and things do need to feel different for you to make progress. And with that, I want to teach you the 3 pillars that I focus on with my clients when I am helping them build unconditional confidence. The first of the 3 pillars is you have to develop a leadership identity. A leadership identity means you view yourself as a leader and you feel like a leader deep in your bones. When I say feel like a leader, what I mean is when you walk into the room, you see yourself as someone powerful, someone capable, and someone who is there to get things done. Now, this is super important. A leadership identity comes from your internal feeling of competence, agency, and power. So it comes from within you. And the thing that trips people up is that they think they have a leadership identity because they feel like a leader in certain situations, maybe when they're with their team or when they're one of the more senior people in the room. But a true leadership identity comes with you everywhere you go. Whether you're the most senior person in the room or the most junior person in the room, whether you're the smartest person on the topic or the dumbest person on the topic, you feel equally powerful and you walk into the room with the same level of determination to speak up and help everyone get results. This is why you'll see people in a room who aren't the smartest and don't have all the answers, but they're speaking up and they're asking questions and they're contributing, and everyone respects that person, not because that person knows everything and not because that person is the actual leader in the room, but because that person is behaving like a leader. That person feels powerful deep in their bones, and everyone in the room can feel it through the way that that person is showing up in the room. The second pillar that helps you build unconditional confidence is emotional resilience. Emotional resilience is an unskippable pillar, and for so many of my clients, it is the foundation that they build their confidence on top of. Emotional resilience means that you can speak confidently and access genuine confidence within yourself, even during moments where you are experiencing emotional turmoil. So let's say that your boss asks you a question and you don't know the answer and you're in a big meeting with a lot of leaders. In that moment, it's very normal to feel overwhelmed and stressed out and nervous. When your emotional resilience is low, that stress and overwhelm takes over and you are unable to show up the way that you want to. So maybe you freeze, maybe you mumble and answer their question really quietly, and you're not able to speak up in the way that you want to represent yourself as a leader. But when your emotional resilience is high, you can have that same exact experience, and you can even have that moment of overwhelm and that moment of brief panic, but you are also able to dig deep within yourself and say, hang on, I think that I can pull this out. Like, I think that I can show up for this question, even though I am experiencing emotional turmoil within me. And you are able to pull it out and answer the question and speak with confidence, even though that moment felt a little bit rocky. So often when you see people who appear really confident at work, it's easy to assume that internally they feel emotionally calm and stable and perfect. And it's easy to think that the only way to project confidence is to feel perfectly calm and stable inside, when actually the people with the most confidence are able to find it and access it and project it outwards, even in moments where they're experiencing emotional turmoil within themselves. I really think about it like a duck. On the surface, the duck looks calm and confident and in control, but underneath the water, they're paddling furiously. This is what emotional resilience is. You might be paddling furiously beneath the surface, but what everyone around you sees and experiences is confidence and power. And emotional resilience flows from the first pillar, which is your leadership identity. When you have a strong leadership identity and you feel like a powerful leader deep in your bones, part of that leadership identity includes you seeing yourself as someone who can handle hard things and someone who can rise to the occasion and someone who can handle more emotional turmoil and chaos than the average person. And that identity helps you rise to the occasion and demonstrate emotional resilience during the moments when you get challenged. This is what enables you to show up powerfully no matter what challenge is thrown at you in the room. The final pillar that will help you build unconditional confidence is having a rock-solid relationship with yourself. Remember, unconditional confidence requires you to feel confident in non-ideal situations where you don't have the answer and you don't have the knowledge and you're under pressure and you don't feel emotionally ready. In order for you to pull it out in those moments and find the confidence, you have to know how to empower yourself during those tough moments rather than tear yourself down. If you're someone who berates yourself and criticizes yourself the minute that you're out of your element topic-wise, or the minute that you start to feel out of your comfort zone in the room, it becomes impossible to build unconditional confidence, because as soon as those conditions go away, you start attacking yourself internally, and that self-attack makes it really difficult for you to take up space in the room. So having a strong relationship with yourself means that you have your own back in those moments instead of tearing yourself down. This is what helps you go from, oh my gosh, it's overwhelming and I can't speak up, to, oh my gosh, it's overwhelming, but I got this. Let me see if I can rise to the occasion. That pivot in that moment from feeling overwhelmed by the experience to being able to powerfully show up for it comes from how much you are able to support yourself emotionally in that moment. And when you have that rock solid relationship with yourself, there's nothing that can happen in the room and no obstacle that would cause you to attack yourself and turn against yourself and tell yourself that you can't handle it and you can't do it. No matter how hard it gets or how challenged you feel, you are always your number one ally and your own number one supporter. So to recap what I've covered so far, conditional confidence is where you feel confident, but only under certain conditions, whereas unconditional confidence is when you know how to feel confident, even when you're not an expert, and even when you don't have status in the room, and even when you don't feel emotionally ready. To build unconditional confidence, you have to strengthen your leadership identity. You have to build emotional resilience so that you can show up powerfully in those difficult moments. And you have to have a rock solid relationship with yourself so that you know how to have your own back when things get hard. When you have these three pillars, you are able to show up so much bigger at work. You're able to speak up even when you're not the most senior person in the room. You're able to exude confidence even when you're out of your comfort zone or experiencing a moment of pressure. And you're able to show up as a powerful leader always, not just sometimes. So instead of bringing your best leadership to smaller meetings where your team is present, but not bringing it into those bigger, higher visibility rooms, you are now able to bring your gifts and your talents and your genius with you everywhere. And as a result, leadership at your company is more aware of your talent and your contribution, which means that you will grow more quickly in your organization. And unconditional confidence makes you feel like such a badass because you're no longer in this mindset of like, I need to make sure that I have the right conditions to feel confident. I need to make sure I know the topic. I need to make sure I'm prepared for every question. I need to make sure that I know exactly what's going to happen in the room. Instead of needing to grip so tightly onto those conditions, you are free. And you know that no matter what happens in the room, you will show up for it. And that inner knowing that you can handle anything makes you feel unstoppable. If you are ready to build unconditional confidence, this is the work that I do with my clients, and I want to invite you to come work with me inside of the Art of Speaking Up Academy. In this program, I'm going to help you build your leadership identity, develop emotional resilience, and develop a rock-solid relationship with yourself so that you are able to speak up powerfully, not just in the easy rooms, but in the rooms that are bigger and more challenging. I want you walking into those rooms thinking, bring it, and I want you walking out of those rooms thinking, I nailed it. If that is the transformation that you are ready for, I want to invite you to add yourself to the waitlist for the Art of Speaking Up Academy. When you add yourself to the waitlist, you're going to get an invitation to enroll early. When you enroll early, not only do you secure your spot in the next cohort, but you get to start coaching with me right away before the program even begins. You're going to get a complimentary one-on-one private session with me that you can use right away to jumpstart your confidence building journey. And you're going to get monthly group coaching with me every single month leading up to the start date of your academy cohort. All of this is included complimentary when you enroll early, and early enrollment is the only way to access these bonuses. So it's the only way to get the complimentary one-on-one session and the monthly group coaching. If you are ready for real transformation, add yourself to the waitlist by clicking the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.